There's been so much debate on how you should set up your business when you first get started and which path makes the most sense. Should you start as a sole proprietorship or should you start as an LLC? Well, today I'm going to be talking about just that. I'll be breaking down what LLCs and sole proprietorships are and which one may be the best fit for you. I'll also be breaking down all the different categories from taxes and operations all the way to even legal protections. And I'll also be showing you the exact path that I took when I first got started. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Now, first off, I do want to start off with two disclaimers. The first one being, hey guys, I'm not your attorney, right? I'm a guy on the internet just giving out and talking about his experiences. So take that with a grain of salt. If you're taking action on any of this material, I recommend talking with an attorney before you jump into it so you can get accurate legal representation. Also, I do want to mention that for some of you guys, I might have noticed that the video quality is a little different. I'm actually traveling right now. I'm out near Luxembourg in Europe and on my way heading down to Africa. You'll see that in the future videos. I'll be shooting and talking a lot more about that. But I actually lost part of my luggage. Some of my luggage was lost by the airline that I flew. So I'm trying to see if I can recover that before I head down. And if not, we'll more than likely be shooting the remainder of our videos this way as well, okay? So besides that, let's go ahead and jump into it. Now, for those of you guys who just want to come here just for a quick response, I did go ahead and in my notes throw in that, hey, my choice 90% of the time is an LLC, right? Because of, the cost versus the protections, right? I look at more so the legal protections that you get from an LLC. And because of that reasoning, I typically will go with an LLC about 95% of the time, okay? So if that's what you're looking for, that's gonna be pretty much it. I appreciate you guys watching. But if you wanna go in depth and you wanna actually know what the differences are between the two, as well as learn about, one of my favorite techniques or easiest ways to set up LLCs, then you'll want to stay tuned. Now, I do want to start by actually just explaining what each of these are. What is a sole proprietorship? What is an LLC? Now, to just jump straight off from my notes, sole proprietorship is you, right? That's pretty much the simplest way to explain it. It's considered an unincorporated business. That means that there's really no separate legal entity between you and the business, right? It's probably the simplest way to get started, and you really don't have to do anything when it comes to any sort of setup, right? This is what most folks end up doing when they're first getting into entrepreneurship, right? So you can kind of think of, maybe you have a friend, or maybe this is you, you're selling stuff to people, right? Let's say, for example, I make cookies and I'm selling cookies to friends, right? That's typically would be considered a sole proprietorship, right? I'm not incorporated. I haven't done anything legally to kind of set up the business, right? I'm kind of just running it as myself, right? And you're gonna see a lot of people, that's how they first get their foray into entrepreneurship. And sometimes what they'll do is they'll take it a step further and get a DBA or a doing business as. That pretty much is it's called a fictitious business name, but it's where you actually file with your, prospective authority, in whatever state you are, to say, hey, I'm doing business under this name, right? Now, when it comes to an LLC is really an entity that's owned by you, okay? Now, it stands for Limited Liability Company, and it's an actual business structure that's created, right? You can think of any real company that's operating technically by itself, right? You might have ownership in it, but technically the company's a separate entity. It's not you, kind of like the sole proprietorship was. The sole proprietorship is looked at as you are the business, right? It's solely you. Whereas an LLC, even though you might be the only one working in the LLC, it's still considered an entity of its own, right? A business of its own. Now, when it comes to the differences between them, let's start with the actual formation, okay? Formation, when you look at sole proprietorships, there's really not much that needs to be done, right? For the most part, you just kind of start your business. You're not really required to register with your state in most cases, unless you want to do something like a DBA or doing business as name, then you will file that with your local authorities. Now, when it comes to an LLC, you actually have to file this, right? There has to be legal paperwork done. You have to file this with your state's Secretary of State, okay? So you file with them your articles of organization. That way they know that you are a legitimate company or you have a legitimate organization set up. Now, be sure that you stick to the end of the video, as later on I will be showing you guys how to actually go about get these articles of organization set up for free, okay? So be sure you stick to it. Now let's talk about the differences that you'll have when it comes to taxes. And I think this part will kind of surprise you a little bit in the beginning. Now, when it comes to a sole proprietorship, you are pretty much what's considered a pass-through taxation, right? Or a pass-through, you're getting taxed, it's passed through. That essentially means that, whatever profits that you have are passed straight down to you onto your personal tax returns, okay? Now, the way that works is you'll still file a regular tax return like you normally would, which is a 1040, but you'll add a Schedule C on there, right? And that's gonna be for your business, right? Schedule C is gonna have your profit and loss. And then once you get to that total, right, that whatever that profit is, it's gonna be added to your 1040. So you're pretty much gonna be paying taxes on whatever tax bracket that you're in for your personal income. But when it comes to an LLC, you are technically filing your taxes separately, but pass-through entity designation is actually what the default is. So you have to elect to be taxed in a different sort of designation. Okay, so if you don't change your designation, let's say you set up an LLC and you're just running with it as the default type of LLC that you have, you're gonna be taxed the same way as you would for sole proprietorship, right? You'll file your 1040 and you'll use a Schedule C to, pretty much show your profit and loss. And all that income will be, whatever your profit or loss is, will be added to your 1040 and taxed at your regular tax bracket. Now, let's say that you have members, right? Or you have, there's two owners in an LLC, right? So you and you have a partner. What'll happen is you guys will use a Schedule C, but you only have to account for half of the profit in that instance, right? So pretty much whatever the profit or loss is, it's split up amongst all the owners of that LLC. Now, something that you can do is you can do things like choose a different type of, tax designation. You can do things like a C Corp or an S Corp, which I'm sure you've seen videos out there of. If that's something that you'd like me to shoot a video on, I can shoot video on breaking down what's the difference between a regular LLC and an S Corp and when does it make sense for you. Just go ahead and throw a comment down below and I'll be happy to get that shot out for you guys. But other than that, you're gonna notice that the S Corp, the LLC and the sole proprietorship are pretty similar when it comes to taxes. Next, we're gonna touch on legal protection. And this is gonna be a huge one for you guys, right? And this is really what I think is gonna be the biggest deciding factor when you decide which one to choose. Now, a sole proprietorship has really no sort of legal protection, right? You are personally liable for any business debts because at the end of the day, any type of business debts that you're incurring are going to be under your name, right? Because you are the business. Now, when it comes to an LLC, you aren't technically personally liable for the business debts, okay? Now, there is a huge asterisk next to this, okay? And the reason being is that, there are situations that could possibly change that for you, okay? Now, the two such examples are going to be one, personal guarantees. If you're ever applying for credit cards or business credit cards, typically, especially for your new company, you're going to see that they're going to require you to have a personal guarantee. If you really dig through all that paperwork and, all those forms that you fill out, you're going to see that there's going to be a section that talks about you being personally liable should your business not be able to repay the debts, okay? And so that essentially means that, if your business isn't able to repay your credit card, whatever credit card debt that you have, it's going to be passed on to you to repay as the business owner, okay? Or as the person, as the guarantor, as they say. Okay, so that's really going to be the biggest difference. One of the biggest examples. Another one's going to be, something called piercing the corporate veil. Now, this is a situation where, if you're commingling funds, if you're, putting your business funds into your personal bank account and then, you're using your business funds in a business bank account for personal expenses, things like that. When you start mixing, right? Mixing all the funds and it gets kind of muddy, as they say, that's whenever you've kind of pierced the corporate veil. And if a lender or whoever lets you borrow money or who feels that you owe them money, if they wanted to, they could technically seek legal recourse and be able to come after you personally for whatever damages that they think that they have, okay? So that's where you kind of want to be careful. That's why I typically recommend that you have a business bank account right off the jump to make sure that you don't run into issues like that. Now, I'll show videos on business bank accounts, things like that. I'll link to them down below so you can take a look at them. But this to me is a no-brainer in terms of you just separating your personal and your business expenses. And it just makes it a lot easier for you when it comes to tax time, right? As well as the legal protections that you're gonna get, especially with an LLC. Now, when we're talking about startup costs, you're gonna notice, just if you think about how I talked about the sole proprietorship, there really was nothing when it came to, no sort of filings when it came to you starting your business. So the startup costs are gonna be very little. Typically, all you're gonna be paying is, something between $10 to $100 for a DBA filing, which is doing business as filing, if you choose to do that route. But other than that, you're not really gonna have much when it comes to startup costs for the actual incorporation or the starting of the business. Now, for you to know how to file a DBA, I recommend that you do a quick Google search with, DBA in whatever state or county that you live in. But typically the requirements are going to vary by, state, county, city, business structure. But in general, you can expect it to be, from $10 to $100. Now, filing articles of organization is going to be around typically, $40 all the way up to $550. And that's really going to just depend on what state you're in. Okay. Now, you got to file your articles of organization, pretty much saying, hey, me and my partners, or me, myself, I'm now starting this business and I would like to be incorporated, and they're going to, validate your documents, so on and so forth, so you can start your business. There is a way for you to do it through the Secretary of State website. You can just search up whatever state you're in and then Secretary of State, and it's going to take you to the website where you can file. I've typically, heard a lot from people that it gets pretty complicated. Even myself, whenever I first started, this is the route I did, was try to do it myself, and it was pretty tedious. But later on in the video, I'll show you guys a partner that we work with that actually does it for free. Okay, they actually incorporate for free. All you have to do is pay whatever your state filing fees are. Now, which one should you choose? I kind of told you guys at the beginning of the video that my choice pretty much every time is going to be the LLC, for the simple reason of the legal protections, right? You want to make sure that you're not at risk for anything that you do through your business. And this just kind of gives you another layer of protection to kind of prevent you from, getting caught up in any sort of situations where that could fall back on you personally, okay? So if you have any sort of assets, or you plan on having assets in the future, I think that doing the LLC is a no-brainer, especially if you have the funds to do it. Now, how exactly do I structure my LLCs for any ideas that I might have? Now, what I typically would do in the past, and I really still do to this point, or to this day, is I would have one sole LLC, right? And all I did with that LLC was try out different ideas that I might have, different business ideas. And if one of those business ideas were to actually become successful and work, then I would spin it off into its own LLC. Okay. The reason why I did that was because instead of me constantly starting new LLCs and paying, between that $40 to $550, I had one LLC that I was trying all these ideas at, so I didn't have to continually create new ideas. But once I saw that the LLC idea, or the business idea that I had, was now a legitimate company, or could potentially be a legitimate company, I would roll it off into its own, entity, just to, kind of shield it from anything that might happen in that main LLC. Okay. Now, I typically recommend that be the structure that a lot of people follow. It's more cost effective, and it makes sure that you're still enjoying the legal protections as opposed to doing like a sole proprietorship. Okay. Now let's jump into, how to actually go about setting up an LLC if that's the route you decide to go. Okay. What I'll do is I'll link down below a company that I partner with and that I'll typically use for any new LLCs that I'll set up. And, this is what I've recommended to folks in the past, because it just makes it a lot easier as opposed to you trying to fill out all the different forms, or try to understand all the different steps that you got to go through when you're doing it on the actual Secretary of State website. Now, the great thing about this company is they will actually do all the incorporation for free, so you're not really paying anything when it comes to their services. Now, of course, they're gonna have upsells and offer different packages where you can actually pay if you want those different offerings that they have. But their base offering, right, the one I'm talking about where it's actually just creating the LLC for you, is completely free. Okay, so you can take advantage of that. Now, keep in mind that even though their services are free, you still have to pay for your actual Secretary of State, or whatever your state's filing fees are. Okay, those are the fees that you would pay. No matter where you decide to get incorporated, you're gonna have to pay those fees. So be sure that you keep that in mind, that whatever your state's filing fees are, you're gonna have to pay those fees. Curious on what else you might need to start a business? Well, be sure you check out this video that I've shot showing you everything that a legitimate business would need to be able to build trust in their customers' eyes. Now, I cover about 10 of the top things that you'll need, things like business bank accounts and business phone numbers, as well as provide you with some of my top partners that can help you be able to get those things done quick and cost effectively. So that's going to be it for now, guys. I appreciate y'all taking the time to watch. Be sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of my future videos, and I'll see you at the next one. Peace.